welcome to the April 3rd, 2019 meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. If you have a phone or some other device that might periodically make noise that you don't realize it's coming, could you turn off the noisemaker part? And we don't have any, we have 2 sets of minutes we have to vote, but nothing's on the agenda.
No, I know, she didn't put them on when we did the updated agenda, so I just told her to put them on next time.
Okay.
Okay?
Request for a continuance under a notice of intent, Patrick and Phyllis McDevitt, 5 North Chop Lane, East Falmouth, for permission to reconstruct existing stone riprap and incorporate new granite steps with riprap.
Yes, Madam Chairman, the applicant is requesting a continuance until April 17th.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Any questions from the audience? All in favor of the vote to continue to April 17th, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Request for determination of applicability. Nanette McCloskey and Robert Cefioli, 51 Weston Road, Falmouth, for permission to construct a house addition, Title V septic system, and associated clearing, grading, and landscaping.
Yes, Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions on the board? Any questions from the audience? If you're here for an RDA and you hear negative, that's really what you want to hear. So hearing none, we'll take a vote. And the vote is to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Terry Eisen, 63 Old Minot Road, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to remove dead phragmites and brush removal treatment, including follow-up treatments.
Yes, Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Could I have a second, please?
A second.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any questions from the audience? Hearing none, motion is to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. David B. and Catherine M. Devane, 371 Sherwood Drive, Falmouth, for permission to demolish existing single-family house and construct a proposed single-family house.
Yes, Madam Chair, the staff recommends a -2 determination under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed by this RDA.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions? I mean, any questions at all from the audience or from the board? Okay, hearing none, motion on the table is to accept staff's recommendation of a negative determination. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Requests for hearing under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authority of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. Okay, Town of Falmouth, care of James McLaughlin, DPW, 0 Oyster Pond Road, map 05017A, 000, Falmouth, Mass., for permission to place sand nourishment along an eroding section of the Shining Sea Bikeway. Do we have any green cards?
I think, Trey,
Yes, we have them.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And Jen, do you have any questions?
I will wait until after their presentation with any questions or comments.
Okay, Jim? Thanks.
thank you, Madam Chair. I'm James McLaughlin, Town Engineer, and here today, or this evening, with Trey Ruthven of Applied Coastal, and we submitted a notice of intent to repair a damaged section of the bikeway just south of Trunk River. Previously, we repaired a revetment section just north of this area, probably a year and a half ago. And over the winter, storm damages washed away a good section of the beach area adjacent to the bikeway, to the point where the pavement was undermined, and as you know, there's a sewer force main that runs underneath the So out of concern for both the path and the sewer main, the force main, Jen allowed us to place some material just to stabilize the undermined section of the bike path. But the notice is to replace or repair about a 250-foot section south of the revetment area. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Trey to go through the plans, and then we'll answer any questions. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Trey Revetment from Applied Coastal Research and Engineering. I just wanted to kind of run through the project very quickly. As Jim said, this section area is about 250 feet in length, and it is immediately south of the stone revetment that extends from Trunk River southward. This section here has been slowly eroding due to kind of sand-starved or sediment-starved conditions. Approximately a 50-foot portion of the bike path in there has been eroding and kind of scarped. Question?
No.
Oh, okay. The proposal going forward is to actually re-nourish this area with a cobble or a mixed grain nourishment. The core along the scarp section will have a coarser material initially, just kind of stabilize the base, while the top will have a more it'll be a sandier composition. The two compositions are actually contained in the NOI that we filed on page 14. Both these sections are staying above mean high water. We'll come from the bike path on a 1 and 3 slope up. The berm, starting in the north end, will have an 8-foot wide crest. To the south, it'll actually expand out to 10 feet. And the foreslope will actually vary from approximately 1 on 3 to about 1 on 4.5, depending as the mean high water line progresses outward to the south. The goal is to kind of maximize volume. If you're unfamiliar with cobble nourishments, this beach is actually a cobble beach. The nice thing about cobble nourishments with a proper amount of volume is the beach will actually respond to incoming wave energy. It'll form different scarps at different levels. This area will still get overtopped during, a significant 50 or 100-year storm. But during smaller storm events, by providing this nourishment, the beach will be able to start responding and dissipating wave energy. It's expected that, during significant events that we are going to have washovers, and I would ask as one of the conditions that the town be allowed to clear the material that, gets pushed backwards and place it back on the beach. And also, maintenance is going to be a key component of this project, where the town has the ability to go out and re-nourish as volume is slowly lost. We're expecting some of the nourishment to move seaward on the profile and kind of shallow out the front slope. And as the beach profile responds, which you can actually see some graphs in the NOI, we'll get some scarps developing depending on water levels and depending on wave energy. But it'll be a kind of an ongoing maintenance project relative just to adding nourishment, just due to the sand-starved conditions that are out there. We cross 3 resource zones: coastal beach, coastal dune, and land subject to coastal storm flowage. With this project being a soft solution, we are not impeding any of the wetland-based laws, either from the state or the local standpoint. I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks. Jen?
The only question I have, Trey, is, there's no filter cloth, correct?
No filter
No.
cloth.
Yep, okay. And you want the town to be able to remove the material if it comes on the bike path and to nourish when necessary?
Correct.
Okay.
The only other condition is, I spoke with Amy Honing, who was on site, I believe, last week with you. Due to plovers coming out, she's a bit behind on writing letters. She does not expect a time of year restriction, but I would just ask that any conditions they put forward just be incorporated into our order.
Okay.
Okay. Brendan? Mark?
Yeah, could you point me towards any references on information of using modest cobble nourishment like this?
Sure, I can, CZM actually has a whole guideline on it. They're actually hugely in support of it. It's actually going on all around the state. It's becoming more and more frequent. Northeastern University is using it up at Canoe Beach, which is in Nahant. Plymouth is
Yeah.
proposed it, in the process of permitting a beach nourishment along Plymouth Long Beach, along the southern end. There's that Bert's Restaurant, and as you extend northward to deal with storm erosion. Winthrop Beach, which is just north of Boston, they put in a large cobble nourishment behind the Five Sisters, which are 5 offshore breakwaters to deal with ongoing erosion and wave overtopping during northeasters that would actually crest the concrete seawall and then progress into Winthrop. So it's fairly well documented. Most of the literature originated out of England and the Netherlands, just due to the composition of their beaches, so it was more of a home court advantage of dealing with, while, mainly in the US, we consider beaches just to be sand, but what we find in New England is that there's quite a mix of cobble beaches. Kind of the key components going forward is when you're looking at stone or a material to put on the beaches, you will really want to find that rounded river rock. You don't want, angular rock that's been crushed or anything like that, because it'll obviously erode over time and smooth itself out, but you don't get the same response. Depending on how you can get material and what your sources are available, a lot of times you end up mixing on site. So what that means is you can find a sand component that meets your grain size curve pretty well. You can find a stone component and then like a larger cobble component at different sources. And so you'll know what volume you want of each material, and so you'll bring it in or sequence your trucks coming in and mix it on site and then place it. Sometimes like this project where we're more concerned about the bike path where it's already been exposed, we'll take the cobble component and the gravel component and lay that down first and then put the mixed material over the top that will actually represent what the existing beach condition is.
I've seen a number of cobble beaches around the area, especially in Mashpee and some in Falmouth, much larger cobbles. You're sort of aiming at 1 inch for larger ones, look like from your sieve data.
So the mix obviously depends on the condition and what the local glacial conditions are. You'll see I'm working on a project up in Plymouth at Garnet Point, and they have outwash that's on the order of 2 feet. It's nice, just big rounded rock, and it will respond too. It's amazing how much energy waves have. So you kind of have to tailor it for where you are and what your wave climate is. In this case, we will get some definitely bigger stones than 1 inch. I mean, we'll be looking at stones on the lower capacity that are up to 18 inches, but you'll see that in the grain size table I put, and I also have a
Not too much beyond 2 inches.
grain size curve here if you wanted to actually look at it, kind of showing the percentages of each and how they kind of break down going across.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all.
All set, Mark? Peter?
No questions.
Maureen?
No questions.
Kevin?
I'm curious, you indicated that another section had been repaired a year ago?
I think it'll almost be approaching 2 years ago. Just to the north, if you're coming down the bike path, we cross Trunk River, and that's where the stone revetment begins. And it runs south about 700 feet approximately. And the southern section of that revetment was repaired. It was about, I'd say 18 months to 2 years ago. I think it was 2 winters ago that the PA landers, or not
Now,
PA
was
landers,
it
are.
the same method with the cobbles underneath and?
No, that section previously had a stone revetment structure, so we were able to restore that. And I spoke with Jim Mahal before we started this project, kind of batting around different ideas. There is a provision basically, because this is a utility, to put it in a revetment, but we both discussed it, and DEP guidance was to let's see if we can do a cobble nourishment initially. If this proves to be completely unsustainable, the town can come back and then discuss, what revetment possibilities or what other hard structures might be warranted. But the big push lately, and I can't really disagree with, is, can we use nature in the most, usable function? If we just continue with revetments and have no nourishment components of it, we're just kind of moving the problem up and down the coast.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Courtney?
I'm just curious about this area because do you have any sense of the changes in the coastline over the last 50 to 100 years? In other words, the railroad's been here since the 1800s.
Correct.
And I'm looking at your picture on page 16, and it appears to show that at one point there was some sort of stone revetment of sorts along there. The reason I ask this is because, you know, you're asking for a fix that kind of looks like you'll be doing this forever.
Well, granted, with, you know, sea level rise, coastal storms, nourishments do have a limited life. The one thing that's really kind of positive about a nourishment is, you know, with sea level rise, it's really easy to increase the height of the berm. It's always a dynamic solution, so it gives you flexibility to deal with incoming storms, changes in sea level, changes that are just naturally occurring. You know, ideally, if you wanted a solution that you never have to go back and living with, you would put a revetment in until the beach in front of it got steep enough that it failed. But currently, with the options that we have available, that's not really in the cards. It might be in the future, but right now, this is the
No, I
solution that we have
understand.
available.
You're faced with a lot of regulatory hurdles that would preclude your armoring this and that sort of thing, but, you know, if you could show that historically there'd been something there, you might have an opportunity to sell us on.
Sure. Looking through the beach, I mean, there is some angular rock, but my guess is that's mainly left over from previous constructions on the revetment.
I mean,
Some of the material that we're seeing is kind of outwash from the old railroad bed that's been exposed and eroded out. I mean, I'd be disingenuous in saying that there was a structure here in the past.
I mean, in the bigger picture, this is a microcosm of what's gonna be happening all along that shore.
Correct. I mean,
Sea level rise, I mean, I won't use the expression that I would in privately, but, you know, it's akin to putting your finger in the dike and the dike disappearing around your finger.
in this case, with a smaller scale nourishment, that's more accurate than, but as you go to larger scale nourishments, I mean, if you look at the nourishment that went in place down by the heights, it's still there. You can actually still measure it. So depending on where you are on the coast, you know, these solutions do have merit. It's just depending on, can we put it in the right place and can we design it correctly?
I mean, you gotta do what you have to do, and I'm hoping it lasts for a while.
That makes two of us.
Thank you. No other questions?
Trey, who's doing the work?
That's not been determined yet. Being a town project, it'll have to go out to bid.
Okay, is there any, I guess this is a question for Jim, because you said they're gonna be mixing some of the cobble on site with the sand.
Depending on what sources we find to identify, it could either be mixed on site, which is simply a matter of, maybe I should have described it better, is that you can actually bring in, if we have 900 cubic yards is what we're expecting if we do the whole project. So we can know on a given dump truck what's coming in. So what you can do is just schedule your dump trucks coming in from the different sources and have them dump. It's not a matter of, you know, having to be fully mixed on site with, you know, stirring it around. It's you bring it in sequence, and that way you're actually forming a mix as it's actually put in within the template. So it'd be very similar to what a natural process is if we were going with a single grain size straight out of a single pit, or bringing it in and placing it.
Okay, so I just wanted to know, you know, if your company would be providing oversight for that or not.
These are all questions for Jim.
Sure, yeah. As far as the, you know, what we had used at the revetment there was, we'd use that parking area as a staging area. We had, in addition to the stone, we also had a stockpile for the nourishment material. So it'd be a similar type operation, and as Trey mentioned, we did for this. And we would have someone from Fly Coastal.
Doing the oversight, and the only reason I ask is because the sequencing and that's, okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, wait, I think Brendan has a question too.
Well, I'm gonna ask mine first.
Go
Okay.
for it.
When do you intend to do this work?
Well, sooner rather than later, however, we have to recognize in the logistics of closing down the bikeway for any period of time is difficult. most likely will be later in the fall. The revetment work, we did late fall and early winter. We finished that, I think it was right around Christmas time in 2017, so about a year and a half ago. But even at that time, we worked on the bikeway for a short period of time.
It's challenging.
At wintertime, there was a lot of opposition to that, a lot of people literally climbing around the fence and laying down while there's no heavy equipment on the bikeway. So later in the year would be the time to do it.
Yeah, well, I was also thinking of the staging area.
Yeah.
It's full in the summer
Right.
and early fall also, so. Okay, thanks. Brendan?
Is it possible to use the cobble overwash on the other side of the bike path? Hand remove that out of that?
Partially what I'm requesting is that in the future we will be able to bring that material back onto the beach. If there's areas that you would like to talk about, that could be incorporated in bringing that material forward and incorporated into the beach. To kind of quickly address Betsy's question is, the nice thing with a project like this is if, through the spring or summer, we had some type of smaller event where we need to go in, that could quickly be done in a matter of a couple of hours of putting material in place to give us a stopgap, waiting for the fall construction. And the nice thing with, 900 cubic yards, while it's a fair volume, the parking lot has capacity to hold most of that, so we could actually stockpile most of the material and go to construction very quickly to make our interruption of the bike path short.
Okay.
Is there any plan to just to attempt to plant any of that to kind of stabilize that, or? You have pockets along
do
the
have
bike
pockets,
paths that have that, they have Rosa rugosa, they have some beach grass, and then there are other pockets that have nothing that have eroded away, but the pockets that are
Currently, there
vegetated-
is no provision to do that. My only suggestion would be is if that's something that's concerning, is that you wait for obviously if we're going in the fall, you don't want to plant in the fall. But you also want to give it that first season to readjust, so, because if you go ahead and plant immediately and we end up with this forced storm, that material's
Got
all
it.
going to be, so I would say wait entire winter storm season, so coming into spring when it's actually an appropriate time to plant, if
Yeah,
that's something that's
I'd also
necessary.
be concerned about culling the rocks that are already stabilized on the other side. Because if you have a storm, eventually, you could get underwash from the other side.
I'm not sure I completely understand, but I think and correct me if I'm wrong, is when we're talking about moving material from the backside back to the front side of the bike path?
Well, no.
No.
I understand that you're requesting that in this proposal.
Yes.
I think you were saying, couldn't you get some of your material from the other side?
Oh,
'Cause we
well,
talked about that when we were on site,
Yeah,
yeah.
whatever material that I think I would ever agree to it would be, if there was a mound immediately next to the bike path, it wouldn't be any significant volume. If there's, a 2-foot ridge that has been, transported in place from previous storms that has just been kind of pushed to the side while clearing the bike path, that material could be flattened out and brought forward. But we're not going to actively excavate or mine
the
that.
area we were looking at is already pretty flat.
No, it was flat, but all that material is overwashed, that is settled from.
Yeah, it has settled, but I'm just afraid that if you
No,
pull
we
it
don't-
out and
We
then.
don't have to do it, it was just something we discussed on site while we were out there.
Yeah,
That's all.
okay, do I hear a
Ideas.
motion?
I move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, to close the hearing and take it under advisement. Any further questions on the board? Any further questions from the audience? Mike?
I fully support this, believe me, because this is the most highly used recreational area in the town of Falmouth. I was in civil defense in Hurricane Bob, and someplace along this stretch, and I don't remember where, the railroad rails are actually bent, so that this is a high-velocity area. And the other thing that was strange to me was that if you can picture that this would be Surf Drive and this is Vineyard Sound, there was erosion on the inside, and it was actually 4 to 6 feet, so that perhaps if they do, I think you should authorize that if there is a storm event that goes over it, they should be able to put some significant stones
Well, that's
on
what
the
I'm
inside.
saying, that's, I wouldn't want to dig out anything on that.
I'd be adding, yeah.
No, I'd bring in new if it
Yeah.
started the road, because I'll tell you what, it was an eye-opener. I wish my memory was better about where the rails were twisted, but I know the culvert at
Trunk River.
Trunk River was gone, so, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah, and the storms are getting more powerful. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table. You have another question?
Nope. I just want to see Trey when you take your motion. I want Trey to come over here. I want to talk to him for a second.
To close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you, gentlemen. Gerald Aronson, trustee, Sandwich Road, map 0901-005-002, East Falmouth, Massachusetts, for permission to construct a single-family house, deck, stairs for water access, Title V septic system, and all associated clearing, excavating, grading, utilities, and landscaping. Good evening. She's occupied, so why don't you begin?
I will. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the staff of the Town of Falmouth Conservation Commission. My name is Gerald Aronson, representing the AEC Trust as its trustee and individually seeking your site approval for a proposed single-family home to be located at 1487 Sandwich Road.
One
Lot
second.
2.
That's it. Mr. Aronson, do you have your presentation?
I had given you guys the thumb drive.
You gave us the thumb drive. Okay. It's down on your desk?
Do you have
Okay.
the green card?
Okay. It's okay, Mr. Aronson, he's gonna get it. We didn't realize, we just kind of forgot it down there. Usually everybody brings theirs. So,
Okay,
The green card.
give
So
us 1 second and we'll get your presentation up for you.
So
okay.
we have
This
some,
is really just an introduction anyway, so,
we have some
Okay.
more housekeeping. Do you have your green cards?
okay.
Do you have your green cards to give us?
The abutter cards,
Yes. Yes. I have already,
Did you give us the little, did you drop them off to Amy? The little return receipt cards?
I had all that I had at the, yes.
Okay. I don't think you had that many
them all.
abutters,
They're
yeah.
all in this, there should be copies of that in
Copies,
this.
yeah, there are copies
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
Okay, the floor is yours until your presentation's ready.
Okay. You know, we're seeking to construct a new single-family residence for my wife and I to live in. My 2 sons and their families currently live in Sandwich. Their spouses and, more importantly, are currently 4 grandchildren, and many stayovers, and enjoy a beautiful pond-front home we're intending to build. As a brief background, my wife and I have been living on Currier Road since 1983. We purchased our home at 409 Currier Road, which is only half a mile down the road, specifically because it was set into the Ashuman-Holly Reservation. We have enjoyed the opportunity to live in a quiet, uncrowded setting, and have made concerted effort to be good stewards of our land. We have also watched the area grow and change over the last 36 years, and are thoroughly aware of the ways in which development has impacted, including the issues caused by the Mass Military Reservation, and now known as Joint Base Cape Cod. I hope that you've all had a chance to make a site visit to the property on Sandwich Road. With an almost due southern exposure, the setting is glorious on sunny days. The site presents a series of interesting design challenges due to topography, defined wetlands on each side, and the pond offset. We have spent a very long period of time to truly understand the unique piece of land and design an aesthetically pleasing home that fulfills the needs of our family and blends into the site with minimal disturbance. There are a series of existing pathways extending around a bowl-shaped area surrounding the proposed house. Due to the topography, we envision that all excavation for the house will be done within the confines of the foundation.
Stop you right there, and put the plan up so
Sure.
that everybody is watching, excuse me.
We can do it first. Let's see what happens here.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. You're better at this than I am.
Don't do that to me yet, you just jinxed me. There we go. You're gonna have to figure out which one that is.
I don't know. I had this scanned staple, so bear with me.
Okay, hang on, let's try this.
It should follow
Nope.
up the stairs.
Yep, hang on. Yeah,
And that's the
Murphy's Law,
land.
says that it is gonna be the last one. There we go.
There you go. Okay,
There we go.
all right. Super. Okay, so basically, what we have, and let me just finish this and then we'll go into the plan. So we're looking to, there are existing pathways right around.
The laser won't work on the TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are existing pathways. When we bought the land, this is just under 2 acres. There's 81, there's around 80,600 feet of upland and then about 3,000 feet of road. This is technically, and I'll go into it, a WRPD protection zone. And we'll get into that, it's all in the presentation. But anyway, we did the offsets, these are the 50-foot offsets, 10-foot buffer lines. The 100-foot offset is here. You probably see it better on your copy, but it's here. All of this has been marked up, flagged, surveyed, so on the site. When we bought the land, the only access to the land was a roadway that was cut in by the government. And I'll get into that project. So since then, we actually cut in a roadway that ends around here, and then it follows along the existing pathway to get down. There are existing pathways over there in the past that go up a bluff, along the top of a bank, go around and come back down. And our intent, I have no interest in disturbing them in any way, shape, or form, if it's at all possible. So, let me just finish the introduction. We'll go through the whole presentation. And, as I said, additionally, we plan to undertake a number of measures to preserve and enhance the site. Specifically, all utilities will be underground and 2 trenches dug on each side of the driveway that's coming in. We expect to add an additional 150 to 200 trees and shrubs. In addition to the roughly 140 that we have already installed, this is about elevation 68. There's quite a drop off here. So the land drops down almost 18 feet from the street to here. This goes down to elevation 50, goes back up to elevation 57 over here, forms a bluff, and drops down to around elevation 46. So it's topographically challenging in the shape, and it also tilts back. So if you go down along the water, you're at 57, and you're going down a slight incline, and everything tilts back away from you. So any drop of water that falls up here will go back, nothing to the pond. Okay, so we've already put in extensive, cleared this, it was all poison ivy, invasive, briars, shrubs, it was terrible. Cleared this area along here, put in extensive planting all along and down the property is very unusual. It was in the same family for 140 years. It was originally an almost 9-acre site. It goes from the boat landing at Courier Road and Sandwich Road north to the Mashpee line. The sisters that owned it decided to split it into 3 pieces several years ago. This house here, this property was bought by Kenneth Jaquith and Christine Miller. They came before this board several years ago for permission to build a house here, which is now built. On the other side, there's the existing very small dwelling that's been there from the 1700s, from what I understand. That was part of the original family's property, and one of the sisters retired and has moved there. So they decided to split it into the 3 pieces, and that's how this came about. Okay, so probably enough of that. We're also asking for permission to put in a stairway going down to the water, to access the water, because right now it's over a 4-to-1 slope. And so the actual access way, there's a drawing of it, you can go through, but we would have 3 pilings at the top, an upper landing, it's all metal, a stainless steel landing, and then actually cast iron treads. They're tree grates that I got. We were in the metal fabricating business for years, it's still on. And we're going to use round tree grates that are open, very aesthetic, and actually take a galvanized spine that goes underneath them and have 2 posts down here. So 3 up here, 2 up here. The entire staircase would be above the embankment, allowing light to come right through the staircase to promote growth and with railings going down the side. So, okay. All righty. Now, you all probably have a good-sized packet in front of you. But let me just kind of go through quickly. Okay. All right, let me figure out how to run this thing. I'm not 100% sure myself. Pardon me being a neophyte in this. Now, I may need a hand for a second.
Trying to work the computer? Which one are you trying to do?
Well, the entire presentation is on here, so, okay, so we can just click down. So the PDFs are the drawings, so we'll go to the actual, septic plans. Yeah, so let's go to the documents, which should be in order. Hopefully they are. That's kind of sideways, okay?
What's his name?
Pardon this being, how do we shut that off? That's it? Okay. Well, I don't know how much you can see it. Unfortunately, it's sideways, but this is just representative. The lot is highly wooded, and I am going to be awful at this. So how do we go to the next piece here? Sorry about this. That's one disadvantage of not having somebody present it for you. Okay, so we want to go to, okay. Okay, well, okay, so this is the first page of the NOI application. I don't know. Well, let's get to somewhere here. Sorry about this. I don't know if this would, be honestly, sorry, I don't know if it'd be easier. Do you people have the actual?
Yeah, we
Yes.
got
Probably
all
be
those,
easier,
yeah.
honestly, to follow that.
Yep.
Than me fumbling around foolishly. Okay, so the first packet, obviously, is the notice of intent. And I don't know if you have any questions in it. Do you want me to go through it? Okay. The main thing is probably the project narrative, which we've assembled.
Yeah, I think everybody's probably read that.
Excuse me?
I think everybody's read the project narrative.
Oh, okay,
And they've looked at your
okay.
plans, so,
And there's the abutters. We've got the wetlands on each side. So I guess at that point, if everybody's kind of read the narrative, that's pretty descriptive of the project and what we're asking for as far as setbacks. Number one, the USGS and the Air Force have done extensive studies on this property. They've spent literally millions of dollars looking at this property because of emissions from Joint Base Cape Cod. Originally, there was a problem with phosphorus emissions from the former treatment plant, which is diagonally across the street and up on the base. Phosphorus in the late 90s, early 2000s was causing some algae problems in the pond. It was determined the source was the former treatment plant. Phosphorus, unlike nitrogen, does not dissolve. It really adsorbs and moves more in a particulate fashion, migrating from soil particle to soil particle. So its movement is very slow, and it's relatively shallow. The aquifer in this area is pretty significant. And I have a letter here from Dennis LeBlanc of the USGS, which describes the hydrologic conditions, found here, and clearly says that although the town of Falmouth, I mean, he doesn't say, although the town of Falmouth maps show this lot in a water recharge protection district, it is not. Any drop of water that falls in and around the land will discharge to the pond. It will not go the other way. So, and that waiver was also granted on the adjacent house that was built several years ago. So we're requesting that you take this out of the WRPD, listing. We then get into a whole different set of offsets, which then allow us to go to a 50-foot offset. You've got two different conditions as far as wetlands on either side of the property. Both of them were clearly marked out in 2013, and then again in 2017 by ECR. They're all flagged on the drawings. And we would request a 50-foot offset from the 100-foot offset on both sides. There is a allowance for a 10-foot workspace additionally in the plan. Then there's the pond offset. And the pond offset, we have references in the narrative to the particular regulations in the town's, ordinances. And on page 58, which is referenced in the narrative itself, the width of the no disturbance zone shall be 75 feet for the following resources. Andromedas, Chondromatous fish run, no. Eroding coastal bank, no. Land underwater. Now, clearly the pond has land underwater. That is further defined later in the document. This is something I have discussed with Jennifer a number of times, of how do we define the offset off the pond. There is a very steep bank between the two. Again, all runoff is cut off by that bank into the water. So she indicated that she felt what was appropriate was land underwater. That's a 75-foot setback. And if you go to the definition of the land underwater, it further defines it as average mean low water level. Surveyors have looked at this. We looked at a 50-foot offset. We then looked at what was a 75-foot offset going back to USGS data as far as the actual water levels in the pond, and determined the offset that's on the plan now. And so the plan was generated off of that 75-foot offset plus the 10-foot workspace for the pond. So we've got the two sides set at 50 plus the 10-foot, and then the pond offset coming in. The topography of the land is interesting. As I said, there's a very significant drop. From the street, the land drops very significantly, not steeply, because it's quite a distance through the pond, but down to elevation 50 from 68, and then sweeps back up to elevation 57 at its highest point, and then drops down to elevation 46, which is the bottom of the bank. So it's quite a contour. It also creates a very natural bowl effect, because the land also slopes as you're facing the water from the right to the left towards one of the wetlands. So there's actually almost a channelization in the property. So what we've designed is something to fit into that space, not affect the surround around it very carefully. I would request that we possibly look at the offset off the pond. To me, and I think we've agreed, the 75 is probably, you know, the most restrictive. There are two other obvious offsets listed in the regulations. One of them is a 50-foot offset. And it's kind of you go down these things and you say, okay, what would apply? And it's a little bit confusing, quite frankly. There's one thing that says freshwater wetlands not listed in FWR 10, 18, 5A through whatever. I think it's a little confusing. I mean, I know we've discussed this before. The other, and I think this is just a point, quite honestly, more than anything, is that on FWR 59, in item 4, there was a change, obviously, in the regulations back in December 8th of 2010. And item 4 says the width of the no disturbance zone A shall be 25 feet for the following resources. Non-eroding coastal banks, this is clearly an inland bank, not in a velocity zone, which it certainly is not, with a slope greater than 4 to 1, which it is, and not adjacent to other wetland resources defined in FWR 10, 1A through C, which it is not directly adjacent, but within 100 feet of those resources, and it is. Effectively, what it says is that in this regulation, if this was a coastal bank and not an inland bank, we could go to a 25-foot pond offset, which we have no interest really in doing. That would push the house far too close to the water for me. If it is reasonable, we have designed the proposal based on a 75-foot offset with a 10-foot workspace. If it is reasonable, we would like to request that we can move the house a little closer to the pond, and there's a very specific reason for this. Because if one looks at the contours of the land, and the way the bowl effect is created. If the house was pushed a little further into the back, the drainage patterns would remain the same, and we would be moving further away from any wetlands on the left side, which is not necessary, but, and it would allow us to really clear the existing paths that exist on site and not disturb anything. So, if it is possible, we would like to move just the absolute footprint as it sits forward within the workspace, not going beyond the workspace, if that's at all possible. If it's not, what we've done and what we've, talked about is perfectly a workable situation and will work nicely. So that's just a request. So what we're looking to do is approval of the site plan as it sits. If it's possible, to move the dwelling, the physical dwelling, forward towards the pond slightly. I think it would be advantageous to the site itself. It is not necessary. We have spent a lot of time trying to create something compliant with our interests and conservation of the land, and have tried to be extremely cognizant of conservation of the land. Not to be long-winded or anything else, my original background was in the water pollution research engineering business. I was in it for a long time. I totally understand this stuff and how it works. In stormwater runoff, we were a big player in this. So this is purely, as I say, just a request that we put in, and yes, at that point, we would like the approval of the siding and approval for the installation of the stairway at this juncture.
Okay,
Any questions?
you ready for some questions?
Absolutely.
Jen?
Mr. Aronson, this plan is dated March 6, 2019.
Excuse me?
The plan is dated March 6th, 2019.
Yes.
When was the last time you came into my office, and what was the plan date at that time?
When was the last time? Prior to?
Yep.
We had the same plan. The last time was probably several months prior,
Okay.
and the plan really didn't change. We actually shrunk the house slightly.
Well, what's confusing me is your 50-foot buffer to your wetland transitioning to your 75-foot buffer. It looked like the same.
Okay, the reason is, one was based on average water level, one was based on average low water level.
No, what I'm wondering is where's the 50, so you have a 50-foot
There's a
buffer
4-foot, there's a
your
4-foot difference between the two. Because of the average low is back. The slope within the pond at this juncture, and one thing I did not go through is, and maybe it's salient to this point, in 2004, the Air Force applied to the Conservation Commission, Heritage, DEP, and so on, to conduct a fairly extensive intrusion, really, into the pond. What they actually ended up doing was all approved, it went through everybody. They came up with the idea to control the phosphorus emissions to the pond. They would put in a zero-valent, what they call reactive barrier, in the pond, in front of this property. They were given permission, brought in some big machines, put in cofferdams, actually excavated across the entire frontage of not just our property, but what was the sister's property at the time, went just beyond, it was right around the average water level, dug down, from what I understand, around 4 feet, went out 50 feet from that point, excavated the whole thing out, put in essence, pig iron filings, which is zero valent iron, just pure iron, mixed it with the soil, and dumped it back in. The idea is the phosphorus that was coming down, and the phosphorus, again, runs very shallow, and actually I discussed this in extent with Dennis LeBlanc last week from the USGS, and the aquifer actually comes down and then comes up through that point vertically into the pond where the phosphorus layer was. So they felt by putting this in, the phosphorus would react with the iron and form a stable ferric phosphate compound, which then just is inert, sits there, and that's it, and acts as a block. And it's been very successful. They monitored the program after that. But the entire waterfront in front of this property was highly disturbed. So everything was dug out, dumped back in, kind of smoothed over. Over time, what has happened is that stones, you'd think stones would settle, but they don't. What happens is, with shifting waters and whatever, the fines go down around stones, and actually the stones come up to the surface. The so-called beach front in front of this property is extremely rocky. I mean, extremely rocky, with stones from 1 to 3 inches in diameter. One of our requests in here is that we get permission to basically go in and rake out some of these stones to try to smooth things out a little bit because of really what happened with the Air Force's activities. So all this has precluded, there's been a lot of intensive work on this. And how this relates to the offset of the pond is that the area in front of the embankment, as I say, the slope is very, very shallow. And so you go out, dropping very little, you go out about 20 feet. If you're wondering about datum, and there is you're looking at that, Jennifer, I've got something from GAF, because one piece of confusion in this, if you look at the plans, USGS uses a mean sea level datum point. That is no longer used by surveyors because of GPS. This datum that I have a letter that I can give you from GAF, and basically there's a 0.83 foot shift in datum between the USGS levels and what's shown on the plans, and when GAF originally surveyed the pond, located the water level, there was a ½ a foot difference between what they had and what the adjusted USGS level was. So basically, you'd have to add about 18 inches, a 1.5 to 2 feet onto what they're showing as low water level to adjust it to equate to the USGS monitored levels. Sorry, it's a little confusing, but this is the way it was done. And if you'd like, I have copies of the letter here from GAF explaining this a little bit. And they tried to, I had them put it on the plan, but I don't think it's very clear at all. And then I have a few copies here if you're interested in the, this is a bit of a summary of what they actually did.
Mr. Aronson, what are you passing out?
this is, I was gonna give you one.
Well, it should have been submitted to us when this was submitted to us. If you're using it as, part of your presentation, you can't expect my board to read it tonight, do you?
Okay.
Okay, so if you want them to take that into consideration, we'll need to continue
It's just
that.
some background.
I don't think it's
information.
not directly related
There are,
to the project.
okay, a couple of things, Mr. Aronson. Who looked at you have a perk test that was done, right?
Yes.
Who from the town observed it?
Honestly, I am not sure. There's a girl from the Board of Health there. I went to the Board of Health. I asked them, and they couldn't tell me. John Doyle was the fellow that did it in connection with Grassy. And I was there when they did it. The report was supposed to go back to the sisters. I asked them.
When was the perk test done?
It was just before we bought the property. It was in April of 2017.
Okay, well, that information, I mean, you don't really have great information on your perk test, on your plan. You have a lot of X's, like
Well, the
April
X's
XX.
are more elevations.
No, under your date.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna kinda need to lock that down. Also, have you applied with the Board of Health yet?
They wouldn't accept the application
Why?
because they told me it had to go in with the overall building permit. Because when we spoke, you said, make sure it's
Yeah.
in. I went there and she said, no, we can't take that. So then I went over to the board, I'm telling you, I went over to,
Wait a minute, who told you they couldn't take your application?
the Board of Health. She said, no, this always now comes from the building department. It has to come with the total application. I said, we're applying for conservation for permission to finalize the site so we can finalize the plan. And she said, well, so then I went over to the building department, and they said, nope, we can't take that yet until you put in the whole submittal. I said, well, we're going to conservation.
Okay,
Then asked me to go over and make sure I submitted this, and we're going to conservation for the hearing. And they said, well, you're gonna have to go to them first and then come with the full building, permit package.
1 second, Mr. Aronson. Maury. This needs Board of Health approval, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, Mr. Aronson, obviously there's a disconnect downstairs. I don't know where it is. I don't work within the Board of Health office. But unfortunately, we're probably gonna have to continue you to figure that out because you need to be on their agenda. And I know we talked about this.
I know.
Yeah, I know we talked about this, so.
Absolutely, we
Yeah,
did.
we also talked about staking the site.
Excuse me?
We also talked about staking the
Whole
site.
site is staked. It has
It has all the resources and the buffer setbacks and all of that.
everything.
Is that all
There's
staked?
stakes out there.
I was out there today and it was only the corners of the house and the lot lines.
Correct?
Well, there are
Okay.
snow
There's
stakes.
flags everywhere,
There, excuse me, there are flags everywhere,
which show offsets.
but the flags don't say anything.
They're written on them.
There are some that have something that says 100-foot offsets.
Okay, yes. Then behind that there are blue and white ones, which say 50-foot offset. Then behind that.
50-foot offset to what though?
Then
to-
behind that are striped red ones, which are the actual, ones put
Okay.
in by Brad.
Okay, so I know you've done a lot of work on this, Mr. Aronson. Oh, I know you have, but there's some little nuances that I'm a little bit concerned with though. What I'm gonna need you to do is we're gonna need to get the Board of Health issue figured out, because I asked
Well,
I asked the woman that works in the Board of Health if she, knew about this property and witnessed the perk test, and I was told, no. That said,
Okay.
we have had some county people helping, so that said, that could have been it.
I don't know.
So we're
The
gonna
day
figure it
we
out.
met, I went from your office.
Nope, I know.
Right there.
I have no doubt that you did, Mr. Aronson. I
And
know
that's
how
what they
thorough
told me.
you are.
Okay.
So, we're gonna have to figure that out.
Okay.
And we're also going to, we'll have to figure that out. And what I need you to do so that this board can go out and reevaluate and figure out the project out in the field, I need you to write up, cause I know I asked you to stake the site and flag the site, so I guess it's a little bit confusing what I'm hearing from my board. So would it be possible to kinda give me an idea of what flags are what?
Sure.
Yeah,
No
okay,
I mean, 'cause
so,
what is shown on the plan,
yes, I understand that.
as far as offsets and flags, that's all from the surveyor.
Yes, I know that, but it's just, you know, when they are very used to having things staked with the stakes written on them, so if you could do that for us,
Not a problem.
that would be very helpful, and then, I don't know, Betsy, if you just wanna continue, because there might be some slight changes, or if you wanna continue tonight
Well, if
with
people
questions.
have questions? I
Okay.
mean, I have a question about one of the resource areas.
Yes, so do I.
So why don't we ask our questions,
Yeah,
and then when you come back, you can
Have a punch list.
have
Yeah.
a punch list,
And-
right?
And
so another one thing, Mr. Aronson, I also remember talking to you about having your plan stamped, remember? Having your
yeah,
plan stamped?
is that a stamp?
That's an engineering stamp, we need a
PLS.
surveyor.
That's
So-
them.
Well, no, he's a professional engineer, we actually need a PLS, so I'm sure there is someone in GAF that can.
That's the owner. He is the guy that
Yeah,
sent
I
it.
understand that, but he doesn't have a PLS stamp, unless he does, if he's a dual
I
PE
assume he
PLS,
is.
go back to him and get me a plan with a PLS stamp,
Because
because
I
guess
told
what?
him, this has to be stamped for the,
yes, and it has to be stamped by a
Commission, and
land
they
surveyor,
Yeah, we
so-
need two
Well, he
stamps.
We need two
stamps. We need the engineer stamp, and then
I
we need the
understand.
land
I mean,
surveyor.
They've been paid a lot of money to do this, and, okay.
So,
That's a
okay,
little
so are you
disappointing.
writing this down? We're gonna have a little list for you,
I-
Mr. Harrison.
I-
Okay,
Okay.
you're doing a
So,
great job.
As far as the flagging, I can either, it's only a few different color codes, I can tell you now, or I can write it
Yeah,
down.
well, we're gonna need the resource area staked, I know I went through this with you, the buffer staked, and
Right.
then the
Okay.
whole, the driveway, the septic, all of that staked out there, okay?
And it would be better if we had a written,
And have a written
Guide to
narrative
what the-
on
No
what the
problem.
stakings are.
No problem.
And you're not the first one that's had to provide this type, when you're using the different color flags,
Well,
it's
you
easy,
know,
but we need to know.
Because they went out, as I said, I didn't do this,
Yep.
this is them. We did, I guess you went out to the site. We did, you will see there are corner stakes.
Yeah.
And then there
They
are
were.
the taller ones as far as the building. Because GAF did the corners, I had asked them to put in more.
So if GAF can provide us, or you can provide us, like, a little kind of list, a key, thank you, I was thinking narrative key,
Absolutely.
a little legend key of what all the flags mean.
Right.
Then that way this board can go back out and get a better idea of how we're citing this out there,
Okay.
okay? Awesome, thank you.
If anybody would like, at any time, I will gladly walk the site with them.
Okay. And I'm gonna hold off any other comments, I have a few until after.
till,
Yeah, till the board.
till, all right. Courtney, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll just follow up on something Jen said first. On the perk test, can you follow up with us, for us, and find out who witnessed it from the town?
Absolutely. I
So that should be
will
on
find
your
out who
list.
from the board was there. I mean, I know what she looks like, I didn't know her name. Unfortunately.
yeah,
Mr.
but I
Aronson,
mean-
there's been, you know, some, county help down at the health department, to just help the town staff out, so it could have been someone from the county, so we'll just figure out who was
Right,
out there.
well, I think he was referring to who was at the actual perk test.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That would be.
That was somebody from, definitely, they knew who she was,
Because
she was from the town.
we need to know who witnessed it.
Okay,
That's also part of the permit process. I mean, this is a complicated site,
it is.
and, you know, I know you've done a lot of work on it, so.
We've tried, I can tell you that,
But
generally. It's
I
been
think
extensive.
the questions that
Hundreds of hours
Jen has
trying to
raised make sense,
deal
and,
with this.
you know, that's the only question I have at this point.
Kevin?
Um,
Oh, yeah.
I guess I have a couple of questions for staff, and I'll do that afterwards. It's all right.
Okay.
I had just a couple of questions, most of them already been asked, but, the size of the house, you say, is 4,500 square feet, is that including all the porches and the decks and the greenhouse?
The total with everything is probably gonna be just under 5,000.
Okay, because I roughed it.
Well,
Very
as far
rough.
as, I'm not talking about the you're asking the footprint or the total house?
Well, I did the footprint.
The footprint should be right around 44 with the decks, with all the decks
Okay.
and the green.
All right, because usually that's another thing, they usually supply us with the lot coverage.
Right, and the percentage
Yeah.
and so on, and I
Okay.
understand that.
All right, so that, and then the, just, we all somehow made it out there, but it was difficult, because there's no number. So it's through deduction that you know this one was this number and that one was that number. And then I did see an orange flag out in the woods and assumed that was it, but it does help if you put a sign on the road that says the number with your name or the project name, so we know where it is. And I will say, the one thing I was very pleased to see is I did see your tree grates, and that those are gonna be used on the stairway with all metal, so that they're gonna last a long time.
We
and-
just got that brown stone.
Yeah.
That came from a historic building that was taken down about 50 years ago. And that's,
Well, it will be nice to have the light penetration on that coastal
Oh,
bank,
you
because
talk about
yes.
those,
So that was a very
open-
positive note on your plan, and I'm sorry, it sounds like we're picking at it, but,
Well, that's, I
um,
wanted to make I don't want to make a staircase that's gonna congest anything. It's just gonna let the air flow through, let the sun come through, and just be kind of part of the whole.
and
Yeah,
then.
I don't think that's,
Okay,
I don't
no,
think that's gonna be a problem.
that's perfect. And then, are there any easements for AFC on this property?
Are
Did-
there any easements?
Yes.
Currently, there's one from the Air Force.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
what she
AFC,
meant, AF,
AFCE.
but it's now
American- yeah.
it's actually AFCEC.
Okay,
They've changed the name.
okay.
And,
They've completely changed the name, but the acronym's
yeah,
changed
so
too.
it's not the biggest thing.
So there is an easement that should be shown on this, just so we know where it is?
It is the existing path. It's
Okay.
the path, it's the driveway that we intercepted the driveway, when we put in a piece of driveway, what it runs into.
Yeah,
is
so I
that-
guess
is that the-
she's asking that you identify that
On
in
the
this
plan.
It used to be, I think it got so
It might be underneath there
layered that
somewhere.
You can't see it anymore.
Okay, I see a hash mark, but it doesn't say what it is, so it just has to be in the legend what that is. And you also didn't tell how many, you did mark the trees that are saved, but you didn't say how many are being removed in the house footprint, and usually we ask for that.
Okay.
And other than that, there'll be more, I'm sure Jen will keep a list for you. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question, Jen.
Yep.
So the definition of an inland bank is different. I mean, this is not a coastal bank. This is an
No, this is
inland
not a
bank.
this is not a coastal bank. This is an inland
No,
bank.
it's an inland bank.
And the definition is,
I'm saying that in a way more in passing, it's something that
the upper,
probably,
the upper boundary of the bank, well, I'm assuming you're gonna measure your 75 feet, because it's a 75-foot setback. The upper boundary of the bank is the first observable break in the slope or the mean annual flood level, whichever is lower. So shouldn't we know what the mean annual flood level is? I mean, that's key for,
well,
you're
that's
talking
what,
about land under
yeah, but that's,
the pond.
that's what GAF did. That's what this piece over here is. That's what it is.
Well, no, we're
This is
talking,
the average water, and then this was approximately mean low water.
well, we need to know the lower, No, that's the lower boundary. The upper boundary is the mean annual flood level.
But
We need to know the upper boundary
The
of the
high
bank.
water, yeah, the high water on here.
But the setback is
The mean
based,
annual flood level.
Okay.
Would you think that means high water?
the setback is based
I'm looking.
on the lower level. It refers you to the inland bank, and that.
How do you know the setback? It says the width of no disturbance zone should be 75 feet for banks of salt ponds, estuaries, ponds, lakes, streams. So wouldn't that be the upper level of the bank?
It's whatever. No.
Okay, let me,
Yeah, but it's not that. Land under water bounds.
And are you thinking?
I am,
Okay.
because I've argued this,
we've discussed this before.
yes,
Um,
over.
Do you see the point that I'm
You're
making?
on,
I
you're
am,
on,
and
you're on page 132.
banks of salt ponds and estuaries, lakes and streams, so.
I mean, normally when people come with a bank and it's a setback from a bank, it's the top part of the bank, not the lower part of the bank.
I think you'll
that right?
find,
Mm-hmm.
Coastal banks, it's the top part of the coastal bank.
well, this is an inland bank,
This is
so.
not a coastal bank.
Well, no, I know it's not a coastal bank, but there's an upper and lower level. And it would
Absolutely.
be the upper part of the bank.
The upper boundary of the bank is the first observable break, correct? Or in the slope or mean annual flood level, whichever is lower. The lower boundary of the bank is the mean annual low flow level.
Well, that's in a
So-
stream.
This is, the only reference to this in the 75-foot offset is land underwater.
No, 10.183A F2F refers to it, banks of salt ponds, estuaries and ponds, lakes, and streams which flow throughout the year.
The Schubert Pond doesn't flow. It's a groundwater fed and
Streams that flow
groundwater
throughout the year.
outletted pond.
Streams that flow throughout the area.
There is
not the
no-
Bahama-
It's
There is no
streams,
actual-
comma, which flow,
Yes,
but before that, you have ponds,
yeah,
and
ponds and everything else.
estuaries, and
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Beth.
I know, we've kind of gone through this a number of times in detail, and it's, clearly these references are somewhat confusing, and that's what I had said originally, but the no disturbance zone, 75 feet, and the only reference in the 75-foot,
it's to mean low.
the pond does not flow per se through the year.
She's not saying the pond flows, Mr. Arison, she's saying streams flow. The definition says ponds,
Right.
streams, yes.
But in
Don't
this
get
ca-
hung up flows throughout the year, because we're not talking about
That's
that.
a clause that's referring to streams,
To streams.
Right, I
not
understand.
referring to ponds.
We'll clarify that for you, Betsy.
Well, I'm just,
Oh, I know.
I mean, it could make a little bit difference as to where
Well,
the
basically,
building envelope is.
Mm-hmm.
if we had to build something from the top of the bank, there wouldn't be room to put anything.
No, that isn't at the top of the bank.
I'm simply
I
saying,
realize it's the
if we
top,
had,
I realize it looks like the top of a bank, but that's, even though it drops off,
right,
that's not a bank by definition. That's not a bank of the pond. The bank of the pond is defined by the mean low water and the average flood water.
Right.
Anything above that, even though it's steep, not the bank of the pond.
Okay. So we're talking about the same point then, which is where, from what reference point back in the water?
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned with, right?
I
So
agree.
you have it from mean low water, but that's the lowest, that's the lower part of the bank. The upper part of the bank is the average flood level. And so that's where it
The
has to-
average water level,
well, what is, it says the average. Annual flood level, the mean annual flood level.
well.
Well, I'm assuming that you'll work with staff to resolve some of these questions?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you look, how much fill? Oh, we'll get back to that. That was my question.
Okay, no, and I understand it, because this,
Betsy had my question, so.
Right.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
you're set? And
I
you-
have no question.
You're set for now?
I went out there, I couldn't find anything.
Oh.
There were only like 2 or 3.
We're gonna
points
get you a
down.
key,
We're
Mark.
we're all gonna go out again. We're all gonna go out again.
That's good.
We'll find things and we'll resolve these issues. But Maury has another question.
How much fill is gonna be brought on site for the, grade changes?
hopefully none.
But you are gonna have some contour changes?
We
Okay.
should have
But not
enough,
bringing any in, okay.
and especially if the house went to the pond slightly more, there would be more, but we're not really anticipating, if it is, it's gonna be a negligible amount.
Okay, thank you.
Courtney?
So clearly, we've got to resolve the issue of where is the starting point for the 75 feet.
Yes.
But my question, and it's not entirely clear here, looking at the plan, and there are two things that lead to this. On the, where you have the proposed greenhouse, is that that second outermost form, is that a step? This area here,
This is a step here.
what's this?
Oh, it's a path.
That's an existing path.
I understand, but is this a proposed path? Or
No,
is
that's an existing path.
Right, but see this,
Yeah, it's the
looks
way-
like, it looks like a
I know,
lollipop.
It isn't. It's the way.
It looks like a
GAF
lollipop.
I know.
What
it's-
is a lollipop? Is that part of the structure of the
No,
deck?
no.
Or is that
This
just,
is this is the greenhouse line. This, I believe, was Jeff Harper from GAF putting in kind of a grade line. It's a meaningless line.
well, yeah,
I
but
know.
it's not clear, because that leads to my next question.
Okay. There is no deck beside the greenhouse.
Okay, so that needs to be cleaned up, okay? It's,
And I said,
because that leads to the next question. In your presentation, you alluded to the fact that you hoped we would feel like we might allow you to move this structure up the bank toward the pond slightly. Now, slightly
well,
is slightly is a
within-
term,
within
is
the
a
workspace.
great term if you're Donald Trump.
I understand, within the workspace.
Courtney, no
We're gonna ta-
politics.
We're gonna talk
No
about that.
politics, I'm sorry.
Which is
It's
Courtney,
moving
we're
it
gonna talk
slightly,
about that,
whoever you are,
'cause I just noticed
moving it
something.
slightly is not defined very
I
well.
understand, and that's why I said, the plan as submitted is fine. We're okay with it, it is
Yeah,
fine.
and frankly, my suggestion would be don't complicate your
I'm not trying.
presentation. If you really feel, if we buy this
Right.
before you start, I suppose you could come back and ask for an amendment, and we could either allow it or not.
I mean, it's, what we came up with, obviously,
Yeah.
And I have spoken about
No,
this.
no,
quite a few
I
times.
understand, and I'm just telling you
This
that,
was- this
don't,
was
don't,
trying to,
don't make it
you know,
more
follow.
complicated than it
And
needs to be.
There's one thing that we do need to discuss about this red line. Okay, Mr. Aronson,
Not a problem.
you're gonna need a continuance. Right now we need the perk test witness, we need you filing with the Board of Health, and we will figure out what happened with that. There's obviously some slight miscommunication down at the other end of where I am, so we're gonna go figure that out tomorrow. We'll go and ask.
All right,
I'm gonna tell you right now, Mr. Aronson, the staff is not at all going to be supportive of moving that house. Okay? You also, go back over there. You're also gonna have to, your area of beach cleaning, I know how we had talked about nourishment, and I said no.
Mr. Aronson, you really should be responding to her into the microphone.
Yes.
No,
Because
into
the
the
public,
microphone.
the public hears you.
Is the microphone? Oh, it is,
It
okay.
doesn't
No,
help
it
us,
doesn't work in
helps
this
the
room,
people
it's
on
for
TV.
the TV.
Sorry.
And then, so you're gonna have to stake out down by the beach what you wanna do, and kind of be a little bit more clear on
Yeah.
that. And we'll go out, I'll go out as a group.
Okay.
Well, you
That's,
could try
key
to
to the
schedule that,
flagging,
might help.
we could do that. How many trees are gonna be removed? We have to clarify the bank from the pond, we have to clarify the BVW from the pond. We have to, clean up that grade change. I need a little bit more information on your beach cleanup. And you're not in natural heritage, is that what you're telling me?
As far as I could see, we are, the only thing that's in it, I believe, is the stair.
Well, the stair.
Everything else should be back.
Well, now, no, not the only thing, cause if your stairway, did you file a natural heritage?
Yes.
Okay, did you talk about the beach cleanup? Because remember I said that this type of pond is a
Yes.
coastal plain pond shore?
Yes.
There are rare plants associated with this pond?
Yes,
Okay, that beach cleanup is gonna affect those plants, so,
I understand.
Okay.
And, you know, when we talked about this, that's when I talked about what the Air Force had done in this remediation condition. So what happens is the beach in front of this land is totally different than the beach down the street, because it was all dug up, and the whole, you know, consistency of the actual soil is a different media.
well, and you sent your application to Natural Heritage?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna need
I
their
have the-
comments.
I have the green card on that.
Okay, because we're gonna need their comments, before we can even close this hearing, we're gonna need their comments. But don't worry, because we have to schedule our hearing within 21 days of you submitting the application, and Natural Heritage has 30 days to comment. So there's usually a lag. In most cases, there's a lag. These lovely state agencies don't kind of talk to each other, so our timeframes are a little different. So we're gonna have to wait until we hear from Natural Heritage, because I know they do have concerns with the pond edge, so they'll probably be going down to check it
Okay.
out.
The application was received by National Heritage on the 14th of March.
Okay, they have 30 days to comment. Okay, excellent, so we're gonna wait for their comment.
So we were trying to, you know, sequence this as much as possible so we could kind of proceed.
Mr. Aronson, what I'm gonna ask you to do is why don't you come to our office on Friday afternoon during office hours?
Absolutely.
And we'll go over all this, and we'll go over one other small thing I just noticed on your plan. Okay?
Absolutely.
So now, how long do you think it's gonna take you to get all this stuff together?
I don't know if it'd be prudent if I came to the office on Friday, if we just walked over to the Board of Health I have the stuff.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna talk to the Board of Health tomorrow,
Okay.
okay?
Okay.
I'm gonna go talk to
Because
them tomorrow.
they told me that,
No,
we
that's
have a new policy and we don't accept it except through the building department. And so, okay.
Okay, I was unaware of that policy.
Jen will straighten that out
I'm
tomorrow.
gonna straighten that out, and I'm gonna let them know what our requirements are. So we'll figure that out, don't worry about that.
And we have the
So why
flagging.
don't you come to our office on Friday afternoon during office hours?
Yep.
And we'll go over everything. Right now, we need a continuance here, date.
When you were making your list, that, I want that candy cane next to the,
I put that in the notes
Clean
as well.
up grade, got it, Courtney. I'll
I
even
want
make a little
that taken
note.
out of there so it's
Okay,
clear.
let's let Jen
Yep.
get the continuance settled, and then we
Okay.
can add.
So, Mr. Aronson, all your stuff, all your new stuff has to be in the office a week in advance. So if we gave you the 24th of April. Which, do
Would
we
that
have
work
this-
for you?
is that in the
I
notice?
can have it this week.
Well, we can't have it this week.
I
We
understand.
can't have it next week.
No, we don't have a hearing next week, sir. I would do the 24th of April,
Okay,
okay?
well,
Well, because we don't have a hearing next week, that means all your stuff needs to be in a week, 2 weeks from today. We have a
okay.
pretty full hearing on the 17th, so the 24th is our next available.
Okay, and then subsequent to that, as I understand it, if everything is in order, you would vote the next week, is that correct? If everything is in order.
We would have 3 weeks from that point to
Right.
issue you an order of conditions, so we would either vote the following week or the
And
week
then
after.
2 weeks after that.
Okay?
So basically, we couldn't do anything with a building permit application until that point.
Well, then you have a 10-day appeal period under the state and a 60-day appeal period under the bylaw. If you
Understand.
you proceed at your own risk,
Okay,
okay? Unless there's any conditions that this board decides to put on prior to the issuance of a building permit, you do have, there are permit appeal periods, again, they're 10 days under the state, 60 days under the bylaw. If you choose to proceed within that time frame, you do so at your own risk, okay?
okay.
All right.
So would someone put a motion on the table, and then we'll do other
Propose
questions?
that
Right,
At the
so-
request of the applicant, that we continue the hearing until April 24th.
Second,
Okay, are there any further questions on the board?
are we comfortable with the list?
Pardon me?
Are we comfortable with his list?
Yes, and Jen will
Yeah.
fine tune it.
Okay.
Jen and Brendan, any other questions? Before we take the
No, not
vote?
right now.
Okay, the motion on the table is to close the hearing and take it under advisement. All in,
No.
no,
it's
no.
to-
oh, excuse me,
Continue.
that's good. The motion on the table is to continue to April 24th. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Sir, we'll see you on the 24th.
Thank you very much, and hopefully we get everything perfectly in order.
We,
And somehow, we gotta disconnect this machine.
what machine? Well, that's
Pardon
all
my
right.
ineptitude on the computer
Brendan will do
presentation.
it, and then,
Mr. Aronson, we're gonna
Michael
give you
has
your USB back tonight, so that you can put whatever revisions on the plan onto that USB, okay?
Okay,
Excellent.
I will,
Did I get a copy of that USGS?
this is my.
I put it in the file. Come for one. Mr. Aronson, do you have an extra USGS?
I'll get it from the main file, Maury.
Okay. I submitted it with it dated.
okay, is everybody set?
Yep.
We'll move on to Nasir and Kay Khan, 434 Seacoast Shore Boulevard, East Falmouth, for permission to reconstruct and maintain the existing licensed timber pier, ramp, floats, and piles.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike?
No, can I have one for the file, please? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Just brought some pictures. I don't have enough pictures.
You can have mine for the file, but let me look at it.
Yeah, I'll put this one in the file.
All right.
Now, Mike, your presentation of those little red boxes right on the thing. I made it incredibly easy for you this evening. One of these days, you're gonna have to learn to use the little machine.
Yes, my name is Michael McGrath. I'm a registered professional engineer and a short-winded professional land surveyor.
You're never short-winded, Mike.
Well,
Let's let Mike tell us what this project is.
this is I'm sorry. This is an application to reconstruct a,
Where did this project go?
an existing licensed pier. The pier was licensed many years ago. We're building it in the same footprint as it was before. We're raising it in order that the public be able to pass and repass underneath the I lost your mouth.
What's your problem?
Nothing, I found it. We are raising the pier in this area so that the public can pass and repass on the Tuttle Flats. This house was built in about 1974. And this pier was originally licensed under Chapter 91 by Waterways License 2006. So what we're trying to do is reconstruct it in accordance with the license. If you've been to the site, there's an extra float in this location, and that's not gonna be maintained because it's not licensed. The float that exists on the ground is 24 foot long, and we're making it 20 to agree with the license. We're using piles that are either green hot or treated with the ACQ, and these piles will be driven into the bottom from a barge that will float at all times. So since this is a reconstruction of an existing license in the same area, I believe that this plan shows a conforming pier. I do have a cross-section to show you that it doesn't show the old pier, but we're providing 5 foot of clearance right in here. I think now we either have to provide stairs down here, up and over, or raise it to 5 feet. That's the reason we raised it to 5 feet. As such, there'll be a slightly different meeting here where the stringers will hit. Today, it hits about, there's 2 steps, and it hits on the lower step. Now it'll hit at the upper step. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have concerning this application.
Thanks, Mike, that was fairly brief. Jen?
Mike, these floats come out in the wintertime?
I don't know, but you could condition if you think they should.
So, let me ask you a question. Why is there an extra float out there, and why would you even send us out to a site with an extra float out there? Did we not warn your client that there's an extra float out there, and we're gonna frown upon that? Especially since it's April, and they probably just put that float in?
All I know is there's an extra float there. I don't know what my
I would
staff said to the owner, period. So I don't know what my staff said to the owner.
I would like it removed before this board makes a decision on anything.
All right.
Okay, oh, and by the way, did you get your Division of Marine Fisheries redated, or your revised comments yesterday afternoon, or yesterday morning?
I didn't get any new comments.
Yes, you did, they went to Jeff Johnson. DMF has a time of year restriction on your project. February 30th to February 15th to April 30th, so.
Well, that's,
They didn't have one at first, but then they,
What was it for? It's something new.
Tom cod spawning
cod.
and nursery habitat.
We've never had that before. This board might have, I've never heard that before.
I was not aware of those time restraints, but obviously you have to impose that is a condition that no work can occur during that time period.
Well, we do like to support our fellow agencies. The pilings do need to be replaced on this dock. I've spoken with the property owner before, I'm just kind of, you know, it's unfortunate that there's an extra float out there that wasn't licensed that, you know, is out there when they know that you're coming to see the project.
No.
So, just the time of year restriction, that's it. Oh, Mike, you said you raised it?
Yes.
How high?
Half inch.
So that there's 5-foot clearance at the base of the riprap, so that there is so that people
You know
can
the
test it.
DMF puts in their new guidance now is 1 to 1.5, right? Or is it right, Betsy? 1 to 1.5.
One width, 1.5 height.
This,
I mean,
all
this
right, I'm trying to answer her other question first, is that it shows it to be, it's hot, I don't see a good elevation that I could talk about. Looking at where it hits the seawall. I need the proof.
Basically, they're asking for these docks to be 6 foot high. Right, Beth? 6 feet?
Well, if there's
Yeah.
3 feet.
Oh, is it 3?
Well, I don't know how wide this is.
How wide your, how much?
If it's 4, it would be 6.
No, it's a 5 foot wide.
It's the same as the license width. So.
According to
what-
this, it's 4
It looks
foot
like it's
wide.
about 18 inches high to answer the first question that was asked me. About a foot and a half high. The pier is 4 foot wide as far as the stringers, the decking is 5 foot wide.
I mean, they originally said they had no recommendations for sequencing, timing, or methods. And then they came back with only the time of year restrictions, so,
Yeah, well, this is a replacement of a
Yeah.
licensed dock, so,
okay. All right.
If-
And we are making it better.
right. If you
Quite a
wanted
few
to make it even better, we would, you know, entertain that, but
I don't think it needs to be any higher, bluntly. I mean, I don't understand, the old standard was based on shadows.
Well, Mike, just for future reference and not on this dock, if you come in with a new dock, expect new guidance from the Division of Marine Fisheries that say they want these docks, the dock height to be 1 to 1.5.
Well, they were silent about that on this, so,
Well, this is a rebuild, I'm talking about new docks.
yeah, and Mike, the
new docks.
explanation, we
This
got,
is a new dock, which I'm kind of question DMF why they didn't put this recommendation on this one.
well, I think it's because it's a rebuild, but I mean, we did get an explanation that there has been some research done.
Oh, yes,
Even though there
absolutely.
is, I mean, obviously, that's why they want it, for the shadows, but they feel that this is much of an improvement. Even docks that have
see-through?
see-through
Yeah, because
decking.
there's still a shadow,
Yeah,
because-
depending on how the sun is.
because you can't,
Hey, 1 second, Mike. Go on, Kevin, I'm looking at something.
If you have to do something to submit again, maybe on the profile, you might want to put somewhere what that height actually is.
Well, it looks like eelgrass in the picture on the deed.
my
does, but
plan
that could've
shows
washed
that the
in.
elevation of the top of the decking is 7.2 feet based on mean low water. The issue that the waterways license is supposed to have an elevation, but it doesn't, so, as I say, when I look at the section on the license, compared to our section, it looks to be about a foot and a half higher on the proposed reconstruction compared to what exists.
So, when you do this, do you just get a little change in the license? Like an amendment in the license?
What we do is we notify them that we're reconstructing the pier according to this, and they will usually extract something from us.
So it could be the same footprint, but it could be higher.
That,
And will they
No,
write
that-
that as a new,
in general, they've not worried too much about those kind of modifications.
okay.
They might modify it, but we'll see.
No, they wouldn't modify this.
The license, you mean?
Yes.
Thank you. We're on
You're
we're on the same page. Mike's on a different one.
Shocking.
Again?
It's fine, the pilings have to
I'll
be
start
replaced.
with Maury.
I just had one question. On the license, it shows 10 pilings on the dock, but on your plan there, actually, the picture of the dock has 12 on the pier.
There's 12 pilings on my plan.
I know there are, but on the license, there are only 10.
All right?
I might be wrong.
No, you're right.
2, 4, 6, 8, 10.
Because there's supposed to be 12-foot spans, maybe? I don't know. It says on the plan, 12-foot span, 12, 12. Anyway. I
I-
don't know if it's a huge deal, but it's not the same as a plan. And then in the aerial, Mike, that you have, the, nice photograph from the GIS, what was the date of that?
2013.
Okay. What is that little square thing floating in the water next to it?
I think that's the
That's
float.
the float that's
float
out there.
that's still out there, okay.
Yes.
I just wanna, okay. And that will be,
Kevin. Courtney?
So, yeah, I just following on what Maury's saying, your plan shows 12, but your cross-section shows 10. Interesting enough. So, we need to get that clarified. Maury points out that the top drawing that I'm looking at, that you just handed out, has 12, right? And they go 12 feet apart, and then they're 5 feet, the last two, with the ladder in between. When you look at the cross-section, you have, it says 12 foot on the center, and you've got 10 pilings.
I'll submit a corrected plan.
Huh?
I'll submit a corrected plan. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it should comply with the license, that's all. How you make that work is your issue. No other questions?
Thank you. Mark?
No comment.
What's people's pleasure?
Close it for the revised plan. He can just submit the Mr. McGrath
Hey,
can
I
submit
need a
the
motion
revised
then.
plan.
what's he gonna do with the pilings?
Yeah. He's
Go to
gonna
10?
submit a revised plan to 10 pilings.
10 pilings, okay.
Correct,
I
Mike?
make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement with the condition that we receive a revised plan.
Second.
Showing 10 pilings.
Did you hear that, Mike?
Yes,
Okay.
I agree that we will submit a revised plan showing 10 pilings.
Thank you.
Okay, and do I have a second?
I did.
Okay, we have a motion, and a second on the table to close the hearing and take it under advisement. And Mike's gonna give a revised plan that has 10 rather than 12 pilings. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Okay. The couple back in the audience has been very patient. I think we're getting to your
Wear them
project
out?
now. they're eager to come back and attend another conservation meeting. Patrick and
Aren't we
Phyllis
all?
McDivitt, that's, oh, wait a second. You're down here. Lori Pierre Angeli and Christine Hipsinski, 361 Sherwood Drive, East Falmouth, for permission to raise, R-A-Z-E, and rebuild a single-family house with attached garage, Title V septic system, swimming pool, deck, porches, driveway, mitigation plantings, and all associated utilities, clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen, do you have any questions before Mike presents this?
No.
Good evening again, Mike.
Yes, good evening. Again, my name's Michael McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and professional land surveyor. My firm, Holmes and McGrath, prepared the application that's before you. What this graphic shows is the existing conditions. There's an existing house, and what the proposal is to basically take this house down and build a new house. And so you can see the outline of the existing house is slightly dotted here, so that basically it's almost in the exact same footprint. As far as the resource areas, this is Great Pond. This is a lot on Sherwood Drive, and adjacent is a salt marsh that I've colored up in yellow. There's a coastal beach. Then there's a coastal dune. It's we've called it coastal dunes. It's not dune grass, but it's the shrub thicket that's indicative of dunes. Then there is, this is existing vegetated area, I've shown the resource area buffer A and resource area buffer B on the plan. And there's a work limit that's shown on the plan, and the bottom line is that there's a slight increase in impervious area within the resource area buffer B. I think it's 127 square feet. We show that there are mitigation plants amounting to 260 square feet in this area, including a proposed cedar tree. The site is within the land subject to coastal storm flowage, but the resource area that have resource area buffers are the ones I described. So I believe that this is an approvable project, and I would ask that the commission approve the project.
Thanks, Mike. Jen?
Mike?
Yes?
Are you sure it's only 127 square feet increase in Zone B?
That's what our narrative says, and since it's drawn and checked by two different people, I
Lauren?
would think. If you,
Dale?
Help me out here.
it's only a little tiny area.
It doesn't look like it's that much more, Jen.
Wait, I'm looking at Zone B that goes through that pool. Right? So, am I doing this right? This,
But you have to see where the house was.
all this is in Zone B, right? Okay, so if you look at the proposed pool area, and you look at the proposed mitigations, which was supposed to be twice the area of the proposed pool, what am I
It does
missing?
not, it doesn't,
It doesn't work.
it
This
doesn't
is
work.
the extra in B, but there's this part that's taken out, and that part's that's taken out.
What part is?
What part's being taken out?
Here,
Should
here,
I explain a little bit by, if you look and see the little
here,
hand?
this
Can you
was
see
in
the
B,
little hand?
and
Net
There's some
alterations.
area that's lost over in here, and then there's
What?
gain in here. So the bottom line is there's a net of 127 square feet. If you want, I'll verify it by sending some kind of summary of it. or-
No, but where's the net? What am I missing, Mike?
There's a
This-
little bit
The
lost.
outline of the house.
Right here, Jen. But it still doesn't look like it's the same, but
Where the outline of the house goes.
This is a little bit right here. See this little square?
Yeah,
And this little piece right here.
where's the outline of their house though? That, no, there's nowhere. Mike,
I'd be happy to submit.
do you have an
something-
existing conditions plan, Mike, or?
Yeah, remember
Right
I showed
underneath.
it to you already, right there.
We just got them.
Oh, no, all right. I do show, no matter what, I show the footprint.
Mike,
I'd be
you're
happy to
supposed to-
submit
I
a rich.
understand that, but you have to submit an existing conditions plan. Okay, hang on.
How much are you saying the increase is?
127 square feet.
Yeah, it's only, that slice is only 5 feet by,
Got it, I see it.
Yeah, it's not much different.
that slight is,
Okay, no, I see it now, I got it now. I got it now.
it's been a challenging evening.
I've tried to.
No, I got it.
move things along.
Actually, look at this, my Kevin had it right, but I was looking at the whole thing. That's fine. No, I see it now. See the little dot?
It's been a long and difficult evening.
No, we got it. Sorry about that, Mike.
12 pilings, 10 pilings.
It still doesn't
You,
look
you
right.
contributed to a little bit of the confusion.
It doesn't look right.
We won't go there.
You just wanna know if I can still count. See, it was over my 10 fingers, Mike, so I was confused.
I keep this.
Wait, are you threatening me?
No, no, no. Hey,
He's threatening me. Do you see that?
I supported you.
We could always declare the swimming pool a vernal pool.
Mark,
I've seen worse.
Mark, do you have any questions?
Oh, not really. I saw a sunfish out there and a bunch of chairs off in the woods. You probably ought
Yes.
to move the sunfish back.
There's some things that need to be moved out of the, yes.
Maybe you could advise your
Replace
clients
that.
that when the commission and the staff are gonna go on site, that maybe they should take all their stuff out of the resource area that shouldn't be there, such as the sunfish, the beach chairs, the extra floats, just, I don't know.
The Great Danes,
Right. The guard dog.
I'm good.
I like the Great Danes. That was a highlight of going on site visits for me. Okay, so, Mike, nothing. Peter?
No questions.
No questions.
Just one. Why is your limit at work so big, Mike?
I put it up against the resource area buffer A.
Okay, I'm just.
That's what I did. They're gonna have trouble getting back there with a piece of equipment.
Well, that was the next question, because I'm looking at the 2 trees that you're gonna save, actually 3. And the one group that's to the north, they're only 5.5 feet away from the limit of work, and the ones to the south are only 2 feet from the limit of work and 5 feet from the house, and the other ones are only 6 feet from the house. So are you gonna have enough logistically, gonna have enough room to do that and save those 3 trees?
It's gonna be very challenging when they build the deck and the pool, because before that, they have plenty of room to get back there. So it's
Right.
only when they do the final work. If you understand what I'm saying.
I
this
do
is
understand,
up
that's
in
why I
the
just wanna
air.
make sure that it's
It-
being realistic.
It's up in the air and so the deck elevation is 13, so they can build the entire structure without building the deck and the pool, and then
Work themselves backwards?
work themselves back.
Okay, because the other
They
thing.
have, and
Go
the
ahead.
other thing is that at a certain point, if they can use a mini excavator, if it
Yeah.
comes down to it.
Yeah, and the other thing is you didn't even tell us what trees you're protecting in their caliper. You have the caliper
the
inches.
caliper
Yeah, you
inches
have the
there.
caliper inches, but just what they were, that's all.
They're trees. Oh, you mean the species?
Yeah. I know what they are, but it should be on the plan. All right, as long as you have enough room, because I don't want to see them gone.
Kevin?
You may wanna
No
advise your
questions.
client, Mike, that if the trees are gone, they'll be replacing multiple trees in that
Caliper
backyard.
inch per caliper inch.
Mm-hmm,
In other words, if you take down a 12-inch tree, you gotta put in like 4 3-inch trees.
And you don't want to do
and
that.
not on the side of the property,
Courtney?
No questions.
so I'd consider saving those trees.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll move to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, motion on the table is to close the hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. See, it was worth your time. Thank you. And good luck. Is this your house?
Jen,
It is
Jen,
Yeah.
just make
Well,
sure
good
the
luck.
groundsel, that's
Okay.
mostly bayberry and beach plum, not backwards.
Okay.
I won't be,
Okay, continued hearings under a notice of intent. That's continued, it's continued, and it's continued to April 17th,
I got it. Which one is that? North Chop?
North Chop.
Yeah, I already wrote that, I think.
Request to amend the existing order of conditions, K-Con 438 Seacoast Shores Boulevard, East Falmouth, for permission to amend order of conditions for DEP number 254374 to include the removal of an existing deck and porch and to construct a 200-square-foot addition with the same footprint. And one more time, Mike,
What number is this one?
this is same
438.
438.
438, I just wanna, yeah.
It's an
okay.
amendment.
I know, I just had to make sure I got the right one.
Yeah.
Put the right thing in the right
Right,
file.
right. It's confusing.
It's
if you
very
don't.
confusing when they're the same place.
Mike, you're making my neck hurt.
Oh, just
I'm not the.
get continued.
Just swapping that.
My
deck
name
to
is
that.
Michael McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and professional surveyor. My firm, Holmes McGrath, has prepared the request to amend the order. This house is being reconstructed as we speak pursuant to a previous approval. And on the street side of the structure, it's fronts on Seacoast Boulevard. On the front side, on a portion of the deck, they want to basically take off the deck and extend the structure. The the area that is dimpled is the proposed new structure. So what we're doing is we're taking away a portion of a deck and a porch, and we're making it in part of the house. If you've been to the site, they're actually constructing this house right now. It's under construction. And there is no increase in impervious area, so we have not altered the basically previously approved mitigation plantings because we're not increasing the footprint. So I'm here to answer questions. It's a very minor change when it comes down to it.
Thanks, Mike. Jen, any questions?
No.
Brendan?
No questions.
No question.
Maury?
I just wanna make sure we put in the findings that there's no more increase, because I think this already did its 200 square feet in the B zone, just so it's always there. And that's it.
Peter?
I have a question, Mike. It was approved prior to this with a deck, square footage, right?
Yes.
And the deck looks to me like it had spaces between the decking and no impervious surface under the deck, just was dirt.
Wait a minute, you don't want to create a precedent that I can now say decks are pervious because there's gaps.
Well,
We've already discussed that, and I was handed my head when I suggested it about 7 or 8 years ago.
Years ago.
Yeah, and that's not gonna change, Mike.
No.
well, just wanted to clarify that. No further questions. No questions.
Do I hear a motion?
Don't be rude.
I'm not rude.
I'll move to
Look.
close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Okay, motion on the table is to close the hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, unanimous, so moved. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Other business. Discuss submitting comments to Board of Health on the use of glyphosate on town property.
Why don't I have, oh, so, So, there is a petition for the town. It was originally presented to the Board of Health. Where is my little yellow notebook? What did I do with it? Okay, I'm completely confused. To regroup. There is a petition before the town, by us, this, Protect Cape Cod Aquifer, to ban the use of glyphosate Roundup on town-owned properties.
By town employees.
Well, this group is not town employees, this is an outside
Isn't that what the
group.
petition says, is by town employees?
But, meaning that the use of glyphosate
That's kind of
cannot be
important.
used on town property by the use of, by an outside contractor
Anybody.
or the
Anybody.
town.
I thought-
It can be used on residential properties. So
Or
the Board of
commercial
Selectmen basically referred this to the Board of Health. So right now it's, before the Board of Health. The Board of Health would, like some comments from the Conservation Commission. The staff sent a letter, which I all sent to you, and made it very clear that those were comments by the staff and not the commission. The Board of Health would like comments from the commission. They have continued the hearing to their next hearing. They had it continued to the 8th, they would have to regroup because that is town meeting.
When is it being held now?
I don't know yet, Courtney, I'll have to find out, but they want to know the feeling of the Conservation Commission. Basically, what we have told the Board of Health staff is that, and, the town tree warden was, originally, commented before the Board of Selectmen. I believe he'll be joining me at the Board of Health. The 300 committee has commented before the Board of Health. One of your agents, Mark Kaspersik, had. The use of glyphosate or Roundup is just, as we explain it, one tool in a large toolbox that we have to help us combat invasives. It's not used regularly, on our properties, but we have used it in the past for treating species such as Phragmite through a licensed, applicator.
And Japanese knotweed.
Yeah. So, I'd be happy to relay any comments that this board has to the Board of Health on the use of glyphosate on your lands, under your care and control.
So I'll give you my comment, is I agree with your letter. I agree with your letter that you sent. I'm in support of the letter that you sent.
Basically, I've asked Mark to kind of compile a list of the sites we have used it on in the past, and there aren't many. And what particular species we have targeted with that, and where he believes these species are on town property. One thing I think the Board of Health is considering, and I was not able to view the tape, I heard this from the Board of Health staff, was they're considering kind of a moratorium from 1 year, and if we need to use it, then we would go to them and ask for a variance or a waiver from that moratorium. I don't know the exact language they were using.
Can I make a comment on that?
Correct. Sure.
Which is, where this is needed, 1 year could make a big difference for something like Japanese knotweed or Phragmites.
But aren't you saying if they did put a moratorium or a ban, that you could get a variance for it?
I would
You have to apply.
we would request
Request
some type of waiver or variance. I don't know what the
No.
criteria
period.
would be. I'm not sure of what the criteria would be to grant that.
I mean, I'm just thinking especially projects where soil's disturbed. We all know how quickly invasives can come in, or has been disturbed, so it's a year or two after that.
I mean, this is, the thing is this is just on town property, so these large residential restoration plans that
It
you
won't cover
see,
them.
it will not affect those.
And honestly, the town uses it more judiciously than anybody because it's very, very expensive for the town to have licensed applicators use it. So in a way, the town is being more handicapped than the general public, who comes in front of us week in and week out with these restoration projects for 5 years using Roundup on their properties, and there will be no ban for them.
Well, and usually, not that this is any better, but usually that's those, at least there are licensed applicators. There are lots of people that are using it
Oh, I know.
who have no idea and think that more is better.
Better, I know.
I use vinegar.
Mark?
I
You
use
know, it's really not, has nothing to do with us, in my opinion. I think it's the town attorney. I think if he approves use of it, he's crazy. Until the appeals are taken care of, the town is just way too liable for something. And, you know,
What
the last
appeals
was
are you
280
talking
million,
to?
gone down to 80 million, but the town could be liable for a lot of problems. It's not a question of the efficacy of whatever the hell it is, glyphosate.
Glyphosate?
That's not really the issue. I mean, we could say, yeah, it works, but, you know, DDT works good on killing mosquitoes, but we don't use it anymore. There are a lot of things that work, but we don't use because for legal type questions, beyond just conservation questions. So we can say, yeah, it works, but if the attorney,
I'm not following you. What
Are you
He's
attorney-
referring to the fact
He's
that
referring to big
two
lawsuit.
two huge lawsuits.
huge lawsuits
I'm aware of
against
the lawsuits.
manufacturer, okay? And that's what's triggering the whole rush to
And I
judgment
believe
on it.
those lawsuits were brought by licensed applicators?
One was a licensed and one wasn't.
Oh, okay.
So that's where it really gets kind of weighted by the courts.
Well, one was a licensed applicator.
And one wasn't.
And it was somebody who,
Still not
who
following
was-
how the town could be
Well,
liable.
Okay,
was
what he's saying
somebody-
is, all right, say somebody goes out and we've
No,
used
I
it.
know, I
and-
get it.
And then they make a lawsuit against the town for using it on their property, and that's what caused them to get cancer or sick or
Okay, got it.
whatever. That's what you're trying to say, right?
the problem was, almost all the data says glyphosate is just fine.
yeah, but
But
I don't know
somehow the
how, I
jury
agree with what
read
you,
it
I agree
differently.
with what you said. These are uninformed people who are
Exactly, but-
saying, and the person, and I told you, the reason I was sensitive to it was the person had lymphoma, which is what my husband originally had. And the doctor, the expert at Dana-Farber said that people have no idea what causes lymphoma. It could have been something in the environment.
Yep.
You know,
Yes, there's
this isn't the
something could be
only
a
thing
trigger,
that this
yeah.
person,
Well, it does kill fish, just so you all do know. I mean, that is a
Full of
proven.
smoke.
Courtney,
I'll defer to Peter behind you.
Okay.
sorry.
A couple of things. The point that Mark brought up about the town liability, probably we should let the town attorneys comment on that instead of commenting from the Conservation Commission.
I agree.
The second thing is that, is it town-owned property or conservation land?
Town-owned property.
So if the.
So it's land under the care and control of the Concom, land under the care and control of the Board of Selectmen, land under the care and control of the Parks Department. I
School committee.
believe land controlled by the school committee.
So the 300 committee.
300 committee is a private entity.
But if they have an agreement with us that we are going to take care of that property as a conservation committee or whatever.
They're allowed to use, the 300
Their
committee
property.
would be allowed to use glyphosate on 300 committee property. The 300 committee stewards, while working with the Conservation Commission, would not be able to use the chemical on town-owned property. Does that clarify that for you, Peter?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, because we do have an MOU with the 300 committee, and it could get,
And I'm in
but it's
agreement,
property ownership.
I'm in agreement with Jen's letter.
Okay. Courtney?
First of all, I'm in absolute agreement with Jen's letter.
Just let you all know, Mark wrote the letter. He did a very nice job. I just signed it.
No, it was well phrased and it makes it, it's sound.
I can't take credit for Mark's letter.
I know there's a good deal of concern about the effects of rodeo roundup, glyphosate. Nationally, I know the World Health Organization's made some comments on it. They talk about it being a possible carcinogen, but there are also lots of studies that suggest that, you know, when used properly, it isn't an issue. And so, you know, from my point of view, we're not in a position to judge the value of some of these studies, but we do have a regulatory approvals by, that allow for the aquatic use, or the use in an aquatic situation of glyphosate when properly, you know, administered. And I think, personally, I think that a lot of the issues with Roundup come from the indiscriminate use of it, particularly in the Midwest, on agricultural things, where they load it on the land and then plant crops that are resistant to it, and that's what they sell. And there may be some effect from that. But the use that the Conservation Commission in this town, it's regulated. We did a big project in Sepawisset. I don't know whether any of that property is on town-owned land. It potentially could be.
I think that was all privately.
Yeah, I think it is too, but I'm not sure of that. But the point about it is that that application was done once, 10 years ago, just about now. The follow-up every year is cut and drip or wipe on selective stocks that come back. And frankly, when I look, I don't think there's been any effect of it. I've suggested to the applicator that he perhaps do some core samples to see if there's any residue in the marsh, and I would be interested in seeing that being done. But absent that, that marsh has come back. It's full of native growth. I've seen no discernible impact on the wildlife. Even though clamming isn't allowed in there, I must confess on occasion I've eaten lots of clams out of there in the last 10 years. And I'm still here.
I think when we made the order of conditions for the Tony Andrews Farm, the only thing we had I asked that there's signage. And that's, you have to do that by law when you use it. Then that gives the public the decision and the option, if they wanna go on the property, it's marked properly. If they're hesitant about it because it was sprayed, then they can make their own decision to not go on. And that's, you know, the legal requirement, and I think that Jen's letter said it all.
So
I don't agree with that. And the reason I don't
Well,
agree is this. Let me just say, because when we write an order of conditions, you know, Blue Flax or whoever comes in and says, we're gonna cut the Phragmites, and we're gonna individually drip it, essentially, we're approving using glyphosate. And I think we as a commission really should defer to our attorneys right now and not do anything else, because this court case, you know, that's a left turn in my mind in the use of glyphosate. It says conditions are totally different now than they were 2 weeks ago.
Oh, they are.
Legal conditions, you know, I certainly agree with Courtney, it works very well. I wouldn't make a judgment on how safe it is. One of the issues is it might take 20 years before it shows up, and we're not, you know, that's
Mark,
beyond
No,
our
we look
pay
at it.
scale.
Mark, you're not requiring, this board never requires someone to use a chemical. We're not saying you can't do your project unless you use this chemical. You're just saying that you're allowing the use of the chemical. It is a private property owner's responsibility and the applicator's responsibility, you know, to determine whether or not they want to use that
I think
chemical.
that's an
Can agree
entirely
with you,
different
but
It's
I
an
issue.
still wouldn't
entirely
do
That has nothing to
anything
do-
until our attorney says says.
That has
that's
nothing to
good.
do with
disagree.
what's on the table. What's on the table is, does
Comments.
Yes, comments.
comments to the Board of Health.
Do
I
we,
wanna,
Kevin,
do we
you're
want a
the only
motion,
one that
or do we?
smoked.
that's what I wanna say.
Did you speak?
I'm happy with comments that say we found it to be
Okay.
effective.
Leave it
Yeah.
at
Support.
that.
So I would like to suggest that we have a
I
motion on
make
the
a
table.
motion that
to
we
s-
support Jen's letter.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
I'll draft up something to the Board of Health, I'll distribute it for you to see, and then pretty much kind of summarizing your
That letter.
discussion, yeah. Your discussion and just reemphasize that I've been asked to appear before the Board of Health, I will go and, you know, briefly comment. Jeremiah Pearson, the, town tree warden, I think is going to join me, I don't know what his schedule is right now. Okay,
I would
thank
just
you.
make sure that maybe Jen, you poke somebody and make sure the attorney looks at this. Not your
Yeah,
comments.
no,
Efficacy is
I'll
one
talk to
thing,
Frank.
but
I'll talk to Frank.
Good.
I see
Potluck
Frank every
dinner.
day. Okay, potluck.
What?
Who's going?
No, we don't need to count who's going. So, the potluck, we've actually did accept, a notice of intent because you guys actually last week didn't give me a definitive answer on whether or not you wanted this or not. So we did have to take a notice of intent today for the 24th. We did do that. We can always go from 5 to 7:30, and then, I think that's when, the town manager said that usually starts wrapping up around 7:30, and everybody can make it here from Falmouth Inner Harbor. I think you can all make it here within 15 minutes, so. Okay,
So what Jen's saying is we have a meeting on the
24th.
24th. If people want to go to the potluck dinner, it's at 5. We expect you to be here at the meeting at 7 o'clock.
Oh, okay. But in other words, there's no requirement that I socialize with the town folks from 5 to 7 or 7:30, is it?
But we are in charge of the,
You're in
main
charge
course.
of the main
So
course, and
if-
whoever, I can get with anybody who will be attending.
we contribute money toward buying.
Yes, you can, yes.
Perfect.
Okay,
Why don't we do that?
yes, we'll do that.
Everybody give money to Jen in the
Oh,
next week.
We'll figure it out. Okay, figure it out.
When is the shindig?
The
24th.
24th.
That's from 5 to.
We're going on to vote order of
5.
conditions.
Oh, I was ready to leave.
Well, you are, well, you're not going to leave.
Chairman,
You want to leave.
permission to leave.
You may leave.
I'm
Mark,
not on
you
any
can
of
go,
these.
you're
Yeah,
not
Maureen
on
may
any
not.
of
I
the orders,
can't.
and I promise you, Mark, I will talk to Frank about your concerns. I don't think you have anything to be concerned about, but I will talk to Frank about it. I know, I can see you're passionate about that, so I will talk to
Thank
him
you.
about that.
Lawrence Rudolph, trustee, 123 Penzance Road, Woods Hole.
Just a minute.
Are these all from last week?
Yep.
So it's you were here,
Which one was it?
you were here, you were here, you were here, and I was here.
Penzance?
Okay,
You
here,
may
I'll
go.
tell everybody who is here. I think it's you 5.
Well, yeah,
I
it
was
is
here.
just us 5.
Courtney, Kevin, Maury, Betsy, Peter, you were all here.
So this was,
Hang on, 123. Where is that one?
I have to remember it.
Let's see.
The addition, a little bit of a change in the driveway.
Wait, no, here it is.
Beautiful house.
I don't think there was much.
Night, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Okay, hang on.
What was the address again? 123?
Weren't I gonna get I think I got, nope, the revised plan. He did submit a revised plan with the vegetation removal by the addition. So,
Oh,
I
yeah,
didn't think
okay.
there were any, your regular standard special conditions.
Yeah, there's nothing there that's.
No, that wasn't
No,
it.
there was hardly any questions or comments, and,
Yeah.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Move to accept as discussed.
When was this closed?
Second.
All in favor of the motion on the table, which is to accept as discussed, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. Right,
Move on.
moving on. Silvestro Calabrese.
Yeah, we know who it is.
Trustee, 8 Wigwam Road, West Falmouth. This was the, putting the chink
this
back
was
in
the poorly built seawall that we're back to redoing because it was done improperly. So now we can,
On the other hand, the positive side is they have numerous public rights signs that are
I
tucked
know.
away that will be brought back
hopefully they'll
out.
be brought out, because now we can look for another 3 years at them.
Yeah.
My concern was the cubic yardage that he just said he's gonna spread around. And, it didn't say it was a beach nourishment project, so if everybody's okay with him just spreading it around, or do they take their little ramp away?
That was my one question. What are we gonna do with the material he said he's gonna spread on the beach? Do we allow him to
Well,
spread it on the beach?
Brendan and I can testify that the bird specialist likes that idea.
She did say that.
And with any luck, the sand will go a little southward and wind up on Saconaset Hills Beach.
Where they starved all the sediment. All right, well, if everybody.
So we're gonna incorporate natural heritage's comment. We cut and we paste.
Good.
Natural heritage time of year comments. It's literally cut
Could I-
and paste.
And I think we should.
We're required to do that.
Should an engineer, obviously, somebody lost in translation last time they chinked. So is there going to be somebody there to make sure that they do it properly?
I agree with you.
I mean,
There has to be
an
somebody
engineer
that
on site.
verifies whether they hire Mike again. I mean, Mike knows how, they're supposed to be tapped in.
Somebody needs to, they need an engineer or clerk of somebody on site when they're putting the chinks in to make sure it's done properly, so we're not impacting the environment for somebody doing a crappy job.
Is there a way to condition project oversight?
Yes. Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
they just
Oh, yeah.
did.
Well, I mean, when we do dredging, there's supposed to be an engineer on board to make sure that they're.
Project
The engineer's
oversight.
liable, he has to go back out and
That's
put them
right,
in, right?
yeah. Underneath the stone.
Betsy?
Yeah.
I had a note here that Jen would investigate the prior agreements for completion.
Oh, that's right. There was much discussion on that,
About what?
that they can't do this work
Until all their
the
other-
COCs are completed.
Okay.
Thank you, that's key. And
They've submitted them. They've submitted about 6 that I have on my desk.
No, I'm talking about the last, the one I was talking about was the one that they just put in to fix everything.
yeah, I mean,
We'll go out there again.
you've got them, but if you find that they're deficient, they can't do this work
Okay.
until they clean it up.
Well, what about the very last one that they did to clean all this stuff up?
That has to be done too.
That has to be
That's
done.
what I thought. Okay, no work until all outstanding
Orders of, projects, notices of intent are done.
are
Do you
completed.
guys wanna help me review that file?
Oh,
More or less a box or 2?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think it's 2.
24 different notices, I think, on that property with
amendments.
amendments.
Okay, got it.
Okay,
I spent
anything
Good
else,
call,
days
Peter.
That's
with
it?
that.
Okay, could I have a motion?
Make a motion to accept as discussed.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, unanimous, so moved. Todd and Elise Stone, 84 Jewelers Avenue, Falmouth.
I don't think there was
This one was to tear the house down, right? Let's
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, Yeah, with the coastal bands down
How is a
there.
bee buffer zone? No questions?
The one right near the yacht club?
No, I didn't have anything.
No, there wasn't really, it was pretty straightforward.
Would I have a motion?
I make a motion to accept as discussed.
Second.
Motion on the table is to accept as discussed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, unanimous, so moved. East End Marine,
Oh,
East
just,
East
Jen,
Marine.
I know the cedar
Pardon me?
clump and a pine tree will stay, and inkberry and plethora and red cedar will be planted. It's in the minutes, so you
Yep.
can, okay.
East Marine Corporation, 89 Falmouth Heights Road, Falmouth. That's to replace, a temporary
Yes,
replacement for the.
Temporary repair.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
pressure-treated plywood.
Yep.
Yeah, there really wasn't much discussion on that either. It has to be done.
Yeah.
They just ran out of money to do it the right way.
No,
I
but
know, I
that'll
just
hold up
double
pretty
checking.
well. 2 layers of pressure-treated plywood, that's an inch thick with all that backfill, that stuff's strong.
Yeah, it is.
That'll
Yeah,
work.
but
Yeah.
they admit all they're
There for
doing is
about 20
buying
years.
time.
Buying time.
Yeah.
All right, then, as the plan was drawn, we accept it as discussed.
Second.
Okay, motion on the table. Motion and second on the table to accept the plan as presented and discussed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, unanimous, so moved. Anthony Salvucci, 36 Shaker Lane, East Falmouth.
Sweet fern. I will have to tell you something comical. We did have somebody come into Brendan's office hours the other day. You see this person occasionally, and he wanted to, what did he proposed sweet fern. I started to laugh so hard I had to go into the other room. Just letting you know.
Why don't we just take it off? That if they want to plant it, they can plant it, but it's not part of mitigation.
Well, that's what I tell,
Nor is bearberry.
Are there any comments on this?
I'm working on it,
No, I'm looking at my notes.
I'm trying.
Peter has a comment.
Okay. They were supposed to update the plan. Mike was supposed to update the plan.
Did we get an updated plan, Jen?
He was going to update his plan to show the reinforced turf.
Reinforced turf.
I didn't see one, I haven't seen one yet, I did see one for 123, I haven't seen one for Shaker Lane.
And 3 trees to be removed, to be on the plan.
Yes, the woolly algae that got the hemlocks.
That's,
All right, and what are we gonna do with the 25 sweet fern, which was a quarter of the planting?
Replace with something more appropriate, as determined by the staff.
Bittersweet.
And there was also a dwarf honeysuckle. I looked that up, Jen.
I did,
It's a little pygmy plant.
I know,
It's like,
I know, that's what I said, I looked it up, she said it was, what, 4 to 5 feet, or 3 to 4
3
feet?
to 4
No,
feet,
No,
it's-
4 to
no.
5 feet,
Gets to 2.5.
and
It
it
gets
gets
like
to 2.5.
2.5.
I know, I looked
we
it
don't
up
use
that
dwarf
hearing.
varieties, so
You know,
bang
Well,
that one out
This isn't a
too.
variety, this is a different species.
I know, but the presentation said it grew to 4.
No, I
and
understand
it
that.
does
I'm
not.
just saying it's not a
Yeah.
variety of a regular, it's not a dwarf of another. It's not a variety of a species, it's a different species.
Oh, yeah, look, I had a sad face.
Huh?
I had a sad
I-
face next to the sweet
Like
fern.
short
Jen, so
people.
you have not received a revised plan?
No, not from Mike Borselli. I don't
Alright.
believe so, don't quote me on that, I did, you know.
Well,
So
I mean,
we-
I have a problem voting for this.
Why, we do that all
Accordingly,
the
we
time.
have to vote. We have to vote. The condition can be that they can't do any work until an acceptable revised
Yeah.
plan comes
We
in.
said he could close the hearing and submit the revised plan, and we'll condition it, so, yeah, we'll
Right,
get
and
one,
then the-
Courtney, don't worry.
Jen, I did have a question at the hearing on that reinforced turf.
Yep,
And I think our interpretation of reinforced turf, that it was a mesh that you could drive on with, lawn over it, and, you know, you wouldn't even see it, but when you drove on it, it would
Mhm.
support a car and not make big ruts or whatever. I think that the engineers or the designers are missing the point, because they're coming in with precast concrete.
I
And-
know.
Okay, so I think that we have to make it clear, and I will bring in some samples, I'll leave them in the office, of what we all, I think, were thinking reinforced turf is supposed to be. EJ Prescott sells it, and it's in all different mesh sizes for different weights, for fire trucks or cars or whatever. Not these, you know, what
We
what
didn't
used
even
to
get a
architectural
cross-section.
concrete block, that they're just filling with gravel, and then they just get compacted, and they become literally a really nice, hard parking space. So I don't think that was our intent, so I just wanna make sure that this
Well,
reinforced
what would you
turf,
like me to do?
that they have to submit what one they're using
Oh, okay.
prior to
yeah.
installation.
I get
You
it.
know, one
That way
place
there,
they use that concrete is on Little Island Road. You know, when you turn onto Wright Street and you turn onto Little Island Road,
Mhm.
like one or two houses down.
Mhm.
Well, I'm gonna warn,
And that actually didn't get compacted. They put it up on the lawn, where they drive up onto the lawn. I don't think they use it very often, so it stays grassy.
yeah. But these, I
Well,
don't think
I'm
are,
But if you used it a lot.
this is gonna get
I'm
you.
gonna tell you guys one thing.
What?
You've been seeing this reinforced turf more and more, specifically out on 509 Central, where we had them give you the cross-section, which was gravel and dense grade and everything else underneath this. You don't require them to mitigate for it, and you should. You absolutely should.
Totally should, because it basically becomes impervious over a very short
Absolutely.
period of time. And they actually make it impervious so that it supports a car. It's just a fancy way of saying a
So,
driveway.
Now,
Um,
do they present a plan that shows the
we did not
profile?
get we did not get a cross-section on this, so we
Nothing.
will have them prior to installation, they have to, submit well, actually, they have to submit a revised plan, cross-section.
Reinforced turf basically is it doesn't support any habitat or anything else, so
No.
it should be mitigated for.
Yeah, it should, and I think this board needs to start doing that, because we've had a couple of different
Couple hiccups. yeah.
engineers come in and say, do you require, I said, at this point, no. They haven't been, but you should.
Mhm.
Depending on how they're constructing it, you absolutely should.
Courtney,
I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, but I thought we had approved these sorts of things before, not with bases under them, but I mean, they could put down the, you know, concrete, but open block, but then fill it with loam and seed it, as opposed to filling with
that's what
gravel.
I'm
and
talking
di-
about
Courtney,
on
what's the
Little
one you
Island
just
Road.
approved the
Yeah,
other day?
that's what I mean.
Well, the one you just approved on Central had
I wasn't
no,
here.
no.
dense grade
that's
and
what he's
everything else.
saying.
Yeah,
But he's saying prior to that, there had been some that were just
Yeah.
set into
yeah.
Loam
the ground,
Loam,
into
yeah.
loam.
and seeded.
And seeded, so I'm fine with that. I mean, if they wanna put a wire mesh down that works just as well, that's fine too. But, I mean, as long as they're, if they wanna mitigate,
So I'm
if they
just
wanna
gonna say,
mitigate for it,
depending
they can
that
do whatever
we
the
have
hell
to-
they want.
That you have to approve it, and depending on the design, there may be additional mitigation requirements.
Right, that's fine.
That's perfect.
There we go, perfect.
That's why you get paid
I'll
big
move
bucks.
to
Yeah.
approve as discussed.
Yeah, second.
Okay, motion, Peter, any more?
Also,
Motion on the table to accept is discussed. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. George and Lori Andrews, 212 Edgewater Drive, East Falmouth.
Oh, this was the dock, right? The reconstruction of the dock, then the, installation of more mitigation plantings to fix the ones that were no longer there, and to remove the,
Kayaks.
to mitigate for the rinse station, and to remove the little gravel fire pit area.
And also to get the kayaks and everything off the salt marsh.
Oh, no, and to stop using the salt marsh to pull the kayaks, cause salt marshes don't grow like that.
Yeah, with,
They don't grow kayaks.
with
No, they don't grow straight lines like
right
this.
angle
Yeah,
bends.
yep, they don't grow, it doesn't grow, nature doesn't work like that.
and also, the two moorings have to have the stern out
Yeah, the
from-
boats have to
Yeah.
more stern out.
Oh, yeah.
Good catch, Peter.
Remove
He's quiet, but you know,
patio.
he's coming
He's
through.
actually paying attention
Yes,
here.
he's paying attention, he's coming through.
Okay, got it.
Do I hear a motion?
Wow.
Motion to accept as discussed.
Second.
Okay, a motion in 2 seconds to accept is discussed. All in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. I'll accept the motion.
To adjourn.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Okay,
Good job.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimous, so moved. There's a card down here.